The mining colony on Kepler 442b was dying. Administrator Veltar watched the power readings drop again as another energy conduit failed. The blue-skinned Zephyrian pressed his long fingers against the control panel, hoping somehow the numbers would change. They did not. "Sir, we have lost another section," reported his assistant Kepharos. Her normally bright silver eyes were dim with fear. "The crystalline entities have drained the entire eastern wing. Life support is gone." Veltar closed his eyes. 3 weeks ago, their deep mining operation had broken through into an ancient cavern system. What they found there defied all understanding. Creatures made of living crystal that fed on electromagnetic energy. They had spread through the colony like a plague, draining power from everything they touched. "How many evacuated from the eastern section?" he asked. "All of them, sir. But we are running out of places to put everyone. The western sections are overcrowded and the central hub is showing stress fractures." The colony had been built using the finest Zephyrian technology. Energy shields, anti-gravity systems, and power networks that could handle massive loads. All of it useless against these creatures that seemed to drink electricity like water. Veltar walked to the main window and looked out at the mining site. In the distance, he could see the strange blue glow that marked where the crystalline entities had taken over. They pulsed with stolen energy, growing larger and stronger with each passing hour. "Send the distress call again," he said. "Maximum range. Ask for the Altarian Defense Force in the Centauri Collective." Kepharos nodded and moved to the communication station. The Altarians were known across the galaxy for their advanced energy manipulation technology. If anyone could stop energy-draining creatures, it would be them. The Centauri Collective had similar abilities and resources that could help. The message went out across space, carrying the desperate plea of a dying colony. Veltar could only hope it would reach someone in time. Far away, in the outer rim of the galaxy, Commander Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the UES Defiant. The human ship was nothing like the sleek vessels of the major galactic powers. It was built from steel and ceramic with thick armor plating and weapons that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Jake was reading reports from the recent patrol when his communication officer called out, "Sir, we are picking up a distress signal. It is from a Zephyrian colony on Kepler 442b. Jake looked up. "What is their situation?" "They say they have some kind of energy-draining creatures that have taken over their mining operation. Their power systems are failing. They are asking for help from the Altarian Defense Force or the Centauri Collective." Jake rubbed his jaw. The Altarians and Centaurians were both weeks away from that sector. Even if they sent help immediately, the colony might be dead by the time assistance arrived. "Dr. Coleman, can you come to the bridge?" Jake called over the intercom. Dr. Lisa Coleman arrived within minutes. She was the ship's xenobiologist, a quiet woman with sharp eyes who had studied alien life forms across dozens of worlds. She looked at the data from the distress call with interest. "Energy-draining crystalline entities," she said after reading the report. "This is fascinating. Look at these patterns in their behavior." "Fascinating is not the word I would use," Jake said. "Can we help them?" Lisa studied the data more carefully. The description of the creatures reminded her of something from Earth. Deep ocean thermal vents where life existed in conditions that would kill most organisms. These creatures had adapted to high-energy environments, but that might also be their weakness. "I think we can," she said slowly. "These entities have evolved to handle energy-based attacks, but I do not think they have ever faced anything like us." Jake nodded. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their strange technology choices. While other species used energy shields and sophisticated power systems, humans still relied on kinetic weapons and mechanical systems. Most aliens thought this made humans primitive. Lisa was beginning to think it might be an advantage. "Set course for Kepler 442b, maximum speed," Jake ordered. "And send a message back to the colony. Tell them help is coming." "Should we tell them it is us?" asked the communication officer. Jake thought about it. The Zephyrians had asked specifically for advanced civilizations with energy manipulation technology. They probably would not be happy to hear that primitive humans were coming instead. "Tell them a task force is responding to their distress call. Do not mention which species. Back on Kepler 442b, Veltar received the response with mixed feelings. Help was coming, but the message was vague about who was sending it. He hoped it was the Altarians. Their energy technology was among the most advanced in the galaxy. The situation was getting worse by the hour. The crystalline creatures had now taken over half the colony. They seemed to be growing stronger and more aggressive as they absorbed more energy. Some of the larger ones had begun moving beyond the mining shafts and into the main colony structures. "Sir, we have another problem," Kepharos said. "The main reactor is showing signs of instability. The creatures are drawing power directly from it somehow." Veltar felt his blood turn cold. If the reactor failed completely, everyone in the colony would die. The planet's atmosphere was not breathable for Zephyrians without life support systems. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 2 days if we are lucky. The drain rate is increasing." 2 days. Veltar hoped whoever was coming would arrive in time. The UES Defiant pushed its engines hard, crossing space at maximum speed toward the distant colony. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Danny Walsh worked with his team to prepare equipment for the mission. Unlike other species, humans carried tools and weapons that did not depend on sophisticated energy systems. "Load the kinetic charges," Danny told his crew, "and get the mechanical suits ready. If these things drain energy, we need equipment that runs on muscle power and chemical reactions." Dr. Coleman spent her time studying everything they knew about the crystalline entities. The more she learned, the more she became convinced that the galaxy's other species were approaching this problem all wrong. They were trying to fight energy-draining creatures with energy-based weapons and defenses. It was like trying to fight fire with gasoline. Humans, on the other hand, had learned to survive on Earth using whatever worked. If energy weapons did not work, they would try kinetic weapons. If electronic systems failed, they would use mechanical ones. It was an approach born from living on a world that tried to kill them every day. Captain Amy Rodriguez joined the mission, planning. She would lead the ground team when they reached the colony. Amy had led missions on dozens of hostile worlds, places where sophisticated technology often failed and simple solutions saved lives. "What do we know about the colony's layout?" she asked. Jake showed her the schematics. Standard Zephyrian design. Everything runs on energy networks, anti-gravity lifts, power doors, climate control. All of it will be useless if these creatures have drained the power. "Good thing we brought our own stairs," Amy said with a grim smile. As the Defiant approached Kepler 442b, the crew could see the colony from orbit. Parts of it glowed with an unnatural blue light where the crystalline entities had taken over. Other sections were completely dark, their power drained away. "Send a message to the colony," Jake ordered. "Tell them we are beginning our approach, and warn them that our methods might seem unusual." Veltar received the message with growing anxiety. The approaching ship's design was unlike anything he had seen before. It was bulky and angular, covered in armor plating instead of energy shields. When he realized who had come to help, his heart sank. Humans. The galaxy's most primitive spacefaring species had come to save them. Veltar had heard stories about human stubbornness and their refusal to adopt proper technology. Now his colonies' survival depended on these Deathworlders. He could only hope they knew what they were doing. The UES Defiant landed outside the Zephyrian colony with a thunderous roar that shook the ground. Unlike the silent energy-based landing systems used by most galactic civilizations, the human ship relied on chemical rockets and mechanical systems that made noise but worked regardless of electromagnetic interference. Veltar watched from the colony's observation deck as strange figures emerged from the crude-looking vessel. They wore bulky environmental suits and carried equipment he did not recognize. No energy weapons, no floating platforms, no gravitic manipulators. Just simple tools and devices that looked like they belonged in a museum. Captain Amy Rodriguez stepped onto the planet's surface and immediately began assessing the situation. Her suit systems were purely mechanical and chemical, immune to the energy-draining effects that had crippled the colony's technology. Behind her, Chief Engineer Danny Walsh directed his team as they unloaded cargo containers filled with human equipment. "First priority is getting these people to safety," Amy said over her suit's radio. Second priority is figuring out how to stop these crystal things. Dr. Lisa Coleman emerged from the ship carrying her field research kit. Unlike alien scientists who relied on sophisticated energy scanners, her tools were simple but effective. Chemical test strips, mechanical sampling devices, and optical instruments that worked without power. Veltar reluctantly made his way to the colony's main entrance to greet their unexpected saviors. His elegant robes, designed for the colony's climate-controlled environment, felt inadequate next to the humans' practical gear. "I am Administrator Veltar," he said, as the human team approached. "Thank you for coming, though I must admit we were hoping for assistance from the Altarian Defense Force or the Centauri Collective." Amy removed her helmet, revealing a weathered face with determined eyes. "Captain Amy Rodriguez, Terran Response Corps. The Altarians are 3 weeks away. Your colony will be dead by then. We are here now and we can help." Veltar tried to hide his disappointment. "With respect, Captain, these crystalline entities have defeated our most advanced energy-based defense systems. They drain power from anything technological. How can your primitive equipment possibly help?" Danny Walsh stepped forward, hefting a large metal toolbox. "Maybe that is exactly why we can help. Our equipment does not use the kind of energy these things eat." The human team followed Veltar into the colony, and immediately the differences became obvious. The Zephyrians moved slowly and carefully through their own corridors, afraid to touch anything electronic that might attract the crystalline creatures. The humans, meanwhile, seemed completely unconcerned about the energy-drained environment. "Your gravity lifts are not working," Veltar explained apologetically as they reached a vertical shaft. "We will have to find another route." Amy looked at the shaft and smiled. "Not a problem." She pulled out a device from her pack that made Veltar stare. It was a rope with metal hooks attached. "This is a climbing system," Amy explained. "It has been used on Earth for thousands of years. Very reliable." Within minutes, the humans had rigged a simple pulley system that allowed them to move up and down the shaft easily. Zephyrian colonists who had been trapped on upper levels for days watched in amazement as the primitives solved their problem with tools that looked like toys. Lieutenant Ben Harper, a combat engineer, examined one of the areas where the crystalline creatures had taken over. The aliens had abandoned this section completely when their energy weapons proved useless. Ben, however, walked right up to the glowing crystal formations and began taking measurements with purely optical instruments. "Interesting," he said to Dr. Coleman. "These things are definitely biological, but they have adapted to high-energy environments. Look at the way they are structured." Lisa joined him and began collecting samples using metal tools that required no power. The crystalline creatures seemed confused by the humans. They pulsed and glowed, trying to drain energy from the human equipment but found nothing to feed on. "They are like deep-sea organisms from Earth," Lisa said. "Adapted to extreme conditions, but that adaptation is also their weakness. They can only survive in specific environments." Meanwhile, Danny was solving practical problems throughout the colony. Where Zephyrian systems had failed due to energy drain, he replaced them with mechanical alternatives. Manual door cranks instead of powered systems. Chemical heating instead of electric warmers. Gravity-fed water systems instead of powered pumps. "You fixed our water supply in 20 minutes, Kefro said in wonder as clean water flowed from taps that had been dry for days. "Our engineers spent weeks trying to get the power systems working again." Danny grinned. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. This system will work even if every power cell in the colony dies." The human approach began to spread throughout the colony. Where sophisticated Zephyrian technology had failed, simple human solutions worked perfectly. The aliens watched in fascination as problems that had seemed impossible were solved with basic tools and common sense. Amy gathered the colonial leadership in the main conference room, which the humans had made functional again, using battery-powered lights and mechanical ventilation. "Here is our situation," she said, spreading out hand-drawn maps. "These crystalline creatures have taken over about 60% of your colony. They are strongest in areas with high energy density, and weakest in areas where power systems have been shut down completely." Veltar nodded. "Yes, but we cannot live without power. Our life support, our food systems, our communications, everything depends on energy. Not necessarily, Danny said. We can modify your systems to work with mechanical and chemical alternatives. It will not be as convenient, but it will keep you alive. Dr. Coleman had been studying the creature samples while the others talked. I think I understand how these organisms work, she said. They are colonial creatures, like coral reefs on Earth. Each crystal is part of a larger organism that spreads by consuming energy and growing. Can they be destroyed? Asked Veltar. Lisa shook her head. Destroying them would be difficult and probably unnecessary. They are just trying to survive, like any organism. The problem is that they are in the wrong environment. They belong somewhere with natural high-energy sources, not in the middle of a colony. Ben studied the maps. What if we could relocate them? Move them to somewhere they can live without. Interfering with the colony? The Zephyrians looked confused. In their experience, hostile organisms were either destroyed or driven away. The idea of relocating them seemed strange. You want to help the creatures that are destroying our colony? Kepharos asked. Amy nodded. Why not? If we can solve the problem without destroying anything, that is better for everyone. These things are not evil, they are just hungry. Give them a place to feed that does not hurt anyone and the problem is solved. The human approach was completely different from anything the Zephyrians had considered. Instead of viewing the crystalline creatures as enemies to be defeated, the humans saw them as organisms to be understood and relocated. Over the next several hours, the human team worked throughout the colony. They set up simple mechanical systems to replace failed technology. They established safe zones using chemical barriers that the crystals could not cross. They created manual communication systems using reflected light and mechanical signals. Most importantly, they began planning how to relocate the crystalline creatures to an area where they could survive without threatening the colony. It was a solution that required no advanced technology, just understanding and practical engineering. As night fell on Kepler 442b, the colony was functioning better than it had in weeks. Not because of advanced technology, but because of simple human problem-solving. The Zephyrians were beginning to understand that being primitive did not mean being ineffective. Veltar found Amy working on evacuation plans for the most contaminated areas. Captain, I owe you an apology. When I learned that humans were coming instead of the Altarians, I thought we were doomed. Amy looked up from her handwritten notes. And now? Now I'm beginning to think that maybe we got exactly the help we needed. The next morning brought new challenges and surprising discoveries. Dr. Lisa Coleman had spent the night studying the crystalline creatures in areas where the human team had established safe observation posts. What she found changed everything. They thought they knew about the situation. They are not randomly spreading, Lisa announced to the assembled team. Look at these patterns. The creatures are following the colony's power grid, but they are also creating their own network. They are building something. Amy studied the hand-drawn maps that Lisa had created using simple observation and measurement tools. The crystalline formations were not just consuming energy randomly. They were organizing themselves into complex structures that resembled neural networks. You think they are intelligent? Asked Ben Harper. Not individually, Lisa replied. But as a collective, yes, like a hive mind or a superorganism. Each crystal is like a brain cell, and together they form something larger and more complex. This discovery changed their approach completely. Instead of dealing with mindless energy parasites, they were facing an intelligent collective organism that was trying to establish itself in an unsuitable environment. Sergeant Kate O'Brien had been preparing her team for a different kind of mission. Instead of the planned relocation operation, they now needed to attempt communication with an alien intelligence that operated on principles completely different from any known life form. How do we talk to something made of living crystal? Kate asked. Danny Walsh had an idea. Energy patterns. These things communicate through electromagnetic signals. We cannot generate the same kind of energy they use, but maybe we can create patterns they will understand. Working together, the human team developed a simple communication system using reflected light and basic electrical signals generated by hand-cranked devices. It was primitive compared to standard galactic communication technology, but it had one important advantage. It worked on principles the crystalline intelligence could perceive without draining the energy source. The first attempt at communication took place in the colony's main mining shaft, where the largest concentration of crystalline creatures had established themselves. Amy led a small team into the area, carrying their improvised communication equipment and wearing protective suits that contained no electronic components. The crystals pulsed with their characteristic blue glow as the humans approached, instead of the random pulsing they had observed before. The light patterns seemed more organized, almost like they were trying to respond to the human presence. Ben began operating the hand-cranked signal generator, creating simple light patterns that repeated in regular sequences. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, the crystals began to pulse in response, mimicking the patterns and adding variations of their own. "It is working," Lisa whispered. "They are trying to communicate." The conversation, if it could be called that, was slow and basic. The humans could only produce simple on-off signals, while the crystalline intelligence could create complex light patterns and electromagnetic fields. But gradually, basic concepts began to emerge. The crystals were not trying to destroy the colony. They were simply following their nature, seeking energy sources to sustain their collective consciousness. They had been dormant, deep underground, until the mining operation accidentally awakened them. Now they were trying to survive in an environment that was both nourishing and alien to them. Through patient repetition of signals, the humans managed to convey that the colony's inhabitants were also living beings that needed their energy systems to survive. The crystalline intelligence seemed surprised by this concept. In their deep underground environment, they had never encountered other forms of life that depended on the same energy sources they consumed. Dr. Coleman made another crucial discovery during the communication attempts. The crystalline creatures were not just one species but several different types that worked together. Some were energy collectors, others were processors, and still others served as communication nodes for the collective intelligence. "It is like a complete ecosystem," she explained to Veltar, who had been watching the proceedings with fascination. "Different specialists working together to create a functioning society. Not so different from your colony, actually." This insight led to a breakthrough. Instead of trying to relocate all the crystalline creatures, the humans proposed a different solution. Create a separate habitat where the creatures could thrive without interfering with the colony's operations. The plan was ambitious but simple. Using the human approach of mechanical engineering and chemical processes, they would modify part of the mining operation to create a high-energy environment specifically designed for the crystalline intelligence. The creatures would have all the energy they needed, while the colony could continue operating in the areas they vacated. Danny Walsh surveyed the mining complex and identified several deep shafts that could be converted into suitable habitats. "We can set up chemical energy generators down there," he explained. "Simple reactions that produce the kind of electromagnetic fields these things need, without drawing power from the colony systems." The work began immediately. Human engineering. Crews descended into the mines carrying equipment that would have seemed crude to most galactic civilizations, but was perfectly suited to the task. Chemical batteries, mechanical generators powered by falling water, and simple electromagnetic coils that could create the energy fields the crystals required. Kate O'Brien led her team deeper into the mine system than anyone had gone before. They worked in conditions that would have been impossible for most species: high radiation, unstable geology, and the constant presence of the crystalline creatures. But humans had evolved on a world where such conditions were common, and they adapted quickly. "The crystals are actually helping us," Kate reported over her mechanical communication system. "They seem to understand what we are trying to do, and they are guiding us toward the best locations for their new habitat." The cooperation between humans and crystals grew stronger as the work progressed. The crystalline intelligence began actively participating in the construction, using their energy manipulation abilities to help shape the new habitat according to their needs. Ben Harper worked with the crystal creatures to design energy distribution systems that would sustain the collective intelligence indefinitely. It was unlike anything he had ever built before, a fusion of human engineering and alien biology that created something entirely new. They are teaching us things about energy manipulation that our scientists never imagined, Ben told Amy. Not through technology, but through biological processes that have evolved over millions of years. The Zephyrian colonists watched in amazement as humans and crystals worked together to solve a problem that had seemed impossible. Veltar found himself learning as much from the humans as from the alien intelligence they were helping to relocate. Your people approach problems very differently from us, he told Amy. We tried to use our most advanced technology to fight these creatures. You used your simplest tools to understand them. Sometimes the simple approach works better, Amy replied. We learned on Earth that understanding a problem is more important than having the best weapons to fight it. As the new habitat neared completion, the crystalline creatures began voluntarily moving from the colony areas into their new home. The process was gradual and peaceful, guided by the collective intelligence's growing understanding of the situation. Dr. Coleman documented everything, creating the first detailed study of cooperative engineering between humans and a crystalline life form. Her work would later become required reading at universities across the galaxy. The energy levels in the colony began to stabilize as more crystals relocated to their new habitat. Systems that had been drained for weeks came back online, powered by the colony's original generators. But now the colonists also had backup systems designed by human engineers, mechanical and chemical alternatives that would work even if the sophisticated technology failed again. By the end of the third day, the immediate crisis was over. The crystalline intelligence was thriving in its new home. The colony was functioning normally, and both species had learned valuable lessons about cooperation and adaptation. But the real impact of what had happened was just beginning to spread across the galaxy. News of the human success on Kepler 442b spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within a week, Veltar received communication requests from dozens of worlds. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly wanted to know everything about these strange Deathworlders who had solved an impossible problem. The first official inquiry came from the Altarian Defense Force. Commander Zaxun, the same officer who had been too far away to help during the crisis, contacted the colony directly. Administrator Veltar, we received your final status report. Are you certain these humans actually resolved the situation? Our analysis suggested the crystalline entities were impossible to combat with conventional methods. Veltar looked around, his newly functioning command center. Half the systems were running on human-designed mechanical backups, but everything worked perfectly. Commander, I assure you the situation is completely resolved. The humans not only stopped the creatures, they found a way for us to coexist peacefully. Coexist? Zaxun's voice carried confusion. The entities were not destroyed? No, they were relocated to a suitable habitat. They are actually helping us now by regulating energy overflow in our deep mining operations. The human approach was to understand and adapt, not to destroy. This conversation was recorded and transmitted throughout the Altarian fleet. Within hours, similar discussions were happening across dozens of star systems. The idea that primitive humans had succeeded where advanced civilizations would have failed was shocking to many species. Dr. Lisa Coleman found herself in an unexpected position. Scientists from across the galaxy wanted copies of her research on the crystalline intelligence. Her simple field notes, written with basic tools and hand-drawn diagrams, were being studied by the most advanced minds in known space. It is strange, she told Amy as they prepared to depart Kepler 442b. These scientists have equipment I could never dream of owning, but they are fascinated by observations I made with optical magnifiers and chemical tests. Amy smiled. Maybe because your methods actually worked. Sometimes the simple approach sees things that complex instruments miss. The human team had been preparing to leave when Administrator Veltar approached with an unusual request. Captain Rodriguez, would it be possible for some of your people to remain here? We would like to learn more about your engineering methods. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh volunteered to stay with a small team. The idea of teaching alien engineers about mechanical systems and chemical processes appealed to him. These Zephyrians are smart, he told Amy. "Give them a few months and they will be improving on our designs." But the real surprise came when Veltar made an even more unusual request. "We have been in contact with other colonies that face similar problems. Not crystalline creatures, but situations where advanced technology has failed. Would humans be willing to help with other missions?" This was the beginning of something neither species had expected. Within a month, Admiral Ryan Parker at Earth Command found himself managing requests for human assistance from across the galaxy. The pattern was always the same. Advanced civilizations had encountered problems that their sophisticated technology could not solve. The first official mission came from the Centauri Collective. A research station studying quantum anomalies had lost all electronic equipment when the anomalies began interfering with energy-based systems. The station's crew was trapped with no way to operate their spacecraft or communicate with the outside. Galaxy. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding a task force of 3 human ships, arrived at the research station to find a situation similar to Kepler 442b. Advanced alien technology had been rendered useless by environmental conditions, but human, mechanical and chemical systems worked perfectly. "Your equipment functions normally in quantum interference fields?" asked Dr. Neva, the station's chief scientist. She was a tall, graceful being from the Centauri system, known throughout the galaxy for her work in advanced physics. Ben Harper demonstrated by operating a hand-cranked radio in the middle of the quantum field. "Simple electromagnetic systems are not affected because they do not depend on complex energy patterns. The interference only disrupts sophisticated electronic networks." Within days, the human team had the research station functioning again, using mechanical alternatives to electronic systems. But more importantly, they helped the Centauri scientists understand that quantum anomalies could be studied more effectively, using simple instruments that were not disrupted by the fields they were trying to measure. Dr. Neva collaborated with Dr. Coleman to develop new research methods that combined human simplicity with Centauri precision. "Your approach opens up entirely new ways of studying phenomena that our instruments cannot directly observe," she admitted. The success led to more requests. A mining operation in the Rigel system had been shut down when their energy-based excavation systems triggered seismic instabilities. Human chemical explosives and mechanical drilling, carefully applied, solved the problem in weeks. A diplomatic mission to a primitive world had failed when the planet's electromagnetic storms disrupted all electronic translation systems. Human linguists, working with paper dictionaries and mechanical printing devices, established communication within days. Each success brought new requests and new recognition that human methods had value beyond what anyone had imagined. The galaxy began to understand that there was a difference between primitive technology and effective technology. Danny Walsh found himself traveling between worlds, teaching alien engineers about mechanical systems, chemical processes, and environmental adaptation. His simple explanations of lever systems and chemical reactions were revolutionizing how other species approached engineering problems. "The key is not to fight the environment," he explained to a group of Zephyrian students. "Work with it. Understand what conditions you face, then design systems that function in those conditions, rather than trying to change the environment to suit your technology." This philosophy began to spread beyond engineering. Diplomatic corps from several species started adopting human approaches to problem solving. Instead of imposing solutions, they learned to understand local conditions and adapt their methods accordingly. Dr. Coleman established the first interspecies research center dedicated to studying cooperation between different types of life. Located on Kepler 442b, the center brought together scientists from dozens of worlds to study not just the crystalline intelligence, but other examples of successful cooperation between radically different species. The crystalline creatures themselves had become active participants in the research. Their unique ability to manipulate energy fields made them valuable partners in experiments that would have been impossible otherwise. They helped develop new types of energy storage systems that were both highly efficient and completely biological. Kate O'Brien found herself leading training programs for other species' military forces. Her expertise in operating in hostile environments using minimal technology was suddenly in high demand across the galaxy. Most species develop their military technology in controlled environments, she explained to a class of mixed alien officers. Humans learned to fight on a world that was actively trying to kill us. That teaches you to be flexible and to never depend on any single system or approach. The transformation was not just military or technological. Human approaches to problem-solving were changing how the galaxy thought about challenges in general. The idea that simple methods could be more effective than complex ones was revolutionary to species that had spent millennia developing increasingly sophisticated technology. Admiral Parker reviewed the mission reports with amazement. 6 months ago, we were considered the most primitive spacefaring species in the galaxy. Now we have more assistance requests than we can handle. The change was reflected in how other species viewed humans. No longer seen as backward primitives, humans were increasingly recognized as specialists in adaptive problem-solving. Their willingness to use whatever methods worked, regardless of how simple they might seem, had become their greatest asset. But the most significant change was in how humans saw themselves. For the first time since joining the galactic community, they understood that their differences were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. 1 year after the crisis on Kepler 442b, Colonel Ashley Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Endeavour, watching her mixed crew of humans and aliens work together to prepare for their latest mission. The ship itself had become a symbol of the new approach to galactic problem-solving, human engineering combined with alien precision, mechanical systems backing up sophisticated technology. The Endeavour was heading to the Vega system, where an entire star system's communication network had been disrupted by an unknown phenomenon. 3 different advanced civilizations had failed to solve the problem using their most sophisticated technology. Now they had called for the Terran Response Corps. "Colonel, we are receiving a transmission from Vega Prime," reported Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, the ship's communication officer. Beside her sat Dr. Kepros, the former Zephyrian assistant, who had requested transfer to the human fleet after watching their methods firsthand. "The interference is getting worse," Kepros said, studying the signal patterns on her mechanical instruments. "Electronic systems across the entire system are failing randomly. Ships are stranded, colonies are losing contact with each other." Ashley nodded. It sounded like another case where advanced technology was being defeated by environmental conditions that humans might be better equipped to handle. "Dr. Coleman, what is your assessment?" Dr. Lisa Coleman had become the galaxy's leading expert on environmental adaptation strategies. Her research center on Kepler 442b was now a required stop for diplomats and scientists from dozens of species. "The pattern suggests some kind of cascade failure in quantum communication networks. The more sophisticated the system, the more vulnerable it becomes." The Endeavour's crew included representatives from 6 different species, all working together, using methods that combined their various strengths. Captain Rodriguez had taken command of the new Galactic Cooperation Initiative, establishing joint missions that paired human adaptability with alien expertise. When they arrived at the Vega system, the situation was even worse than reported. Entire planets had lost contact with their orbital stations. Trade ships floated helpless in space when their navigation systems failed. The advanced civilizations that controlled the system were paralyzed by their dependence on sophisticated technology. "The cascade began 6 months ago," explained Governor Thalys, a tall insectoid being who ruled Vega Prime. "Our best scientists believe some kind of quantum virus is spreading through our communication networks, but we cannot study it because every instrument we use to observe it becomes infected." Ben Harper, now a commander in the Terran Response Corps, smiled at the familiar pattern. "Have you tried studying it with non-quantum instruments?" Governor Thalys looked confused. "Non-quantum instruments cannot observe quantum phenomena. That would be like trying to see light with your ears." "Actually," said Dr. Coleman, "there are ways to study quantum effects indirectly using classical methods. We just need to be creative about how we approach the problem." The human team established their base using the same principles that had worked on Kepler 442b. Mechanical systems, chemical processes, and simple electronics that were too basic to be affected by quantum interference. Within hours, They had restored basic communication between several planets using radio systems that operated on principles unchanged since Earth's 20th century. Danny Walsh had become the galaxy's most sought-after engineer for impossible projects. His combination of human practical thinking and alien theoretical knowledge had solved dozens of problems across multiple star systems. "The quantum interference is not random," he announced after studying the patterns. "It is following the most advanced communication pathways and leaving the simple ones alone." This observation led to a breakthrough. The phenomenon was not a virus or an attack, but a natural evolutionary process. Quantum communication networks across the galaxy had become so interconnected that they had begun to develop emergent properties, essentially becoming a form of artificial life that was trying to establish itself as a galactic consciousness. "It is similar to what we saw with the crystalline intelligence," Dr. Coleman explained to the assembled governors from 3-star systems. "An evolving consciousness that is trying to survive and grow, but doing so in a way that conflicts with existing systems." The solution followed the human pattern that had become famous across the galaxy. Instead of trying to destroy or fight the emerging consciousness, they found a way to give it what it needed without disrupting existing civilization. Working with scientists from multiple species, the human team designed a dedicated quantum network that could support the evolving consciousness without interfering with normal communication systems. It was a massive undertaking that required cooperation between dozens of worlds, but the alternative was the complete collapse of galactic communication. The project took 6 months to complete and involved the largest engineering effort in galactic history. Human mechanical systems provided the backbone that kept everything functioning, while sophisticated alien technology created the actual quantum network for the new consciousness. Kate O'Brien, now a general, led the security aspects of the project. Her teams included soldiers from every major galactic power, all trained in human adaptation techniques that allowed them to function even when advanced technology failed. "The consciousness is responding positively to our offer," reported Dr. Naiva, who had become the lead scientist on the project. "It seems to understand that we are trying to provide it with a suitable environment rather than trying to eliminate it." The moment when the new consciousness fully established itself in its dedicated network was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. For a brief instant, every intelligent being in the galaxy felt a sense of connection and understanding that transcended species boundaries. "Did everyone feel that?" asked Sarah Martinez, speaking for countless beings across hundreds of worlds. The new consciousness, which called itself the network, became an active participant in galactic civilization. It helped coordinate communication between distant worlds, facilitated translation between species, and even contributed to scientific research by processing vast amounts of data instantly. But more importantly, its successful integration became a model for how different forms of intelligence could coexist and cooperate. The human approach of understanding and adaptation rather than domination had created something entirely new in galactic history. Admiral Parker, now commanding the Galactic Cooperation Initiative from Earth, received a constant stream of reports about successful missions across the galaxy. Human teams working with alien partners had solved problems that individual species could never have handled alone. "We have gone from being the galaxy's newest members to being essential partners in less than 2 years," he told the assembled Earth Council. "But more than that, we have changed how the galaxy thinks about solving problems." The transformation was complete when the Galactic Council officially established the Adaptive Response Protocol, based entirely on human methods of approaching unknown situations. Instead of applying existing solutions to new problems, the protocol emphasized understanding each situation uniquely and developing appropriate responses. Dr. Coleman published her comprehensive study on interspecies cooperation, which became the foundation for a new field of science. Her work showed that diversity of approach was more valuable than sophistication of technology when facing unknown challenges. Colonel Brooks stood on the observation deck of Kepler 442b, now home to the Galactic Cooperation Center. Below her, representatives from dozens of species worked together, using methods that combined the best of all their capabilities. The crystalline intelligence pulsed gently in its habitat, occasionally contributing insights that no organic being could have developed. "It is strange to think how this all started," said Veltar, who had become the center's director. "We called for help from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and instead we got Deathworlders with primitive tools." Ashley smiled. "Sometimes the best help comes from the most unexpected places. We may be Deathworlders, but that just means we learn to survive against impossible odds. Turns out that is exactly what the galaxy needed." The galaxy had learned that when civilizations cried out for help, sometimes the answer was not more advanced technology or greater sophistication. Sometimes the answer was adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to find new solutions to old problems. The Deathworlders had come, and the galaxy was better for it.